one of the big questions that people always ask is, okay, well, if God's so good, why doesn't it intervene and stop all this, make it all happen the right way? Well, I wrote a talk about this, and I didn't expect that I'd be starting it at, what time is it?
2:22.
At 2:22. So for the sake of including some other stuff, I think what I'm going to do is probably send out the details of this talk, and I'll just make some of the points in less than the half hour or 3/4 an hour it might have taken to read this thing.
We can also record it and send out a recording later.
Maybe. I'm not gonna commit to that, to doing a recording. But I'll say it this way. So where's God in all this? Okay, and the reason why that question comes up is because most people who are asking it have a vision of who God is that came out of our tradition and came out of many other traditions, that essentially is big man, now we're advancing to say maybe big woman in heaven, who intervenes whenever it feels called to do so. And so if we only pray more intensely, and actually, why should we even have to pray? If God is a good force in the world, why doesn't she or he or it intervene? Now, this is a question that has been there for a long time. And because we could have said the same thing about the Holocaust, we could have said the same thing about the 2,000 years of oppression under Christian rules in Europe. We have to evolve our conception of God. And so that's what I want to talk about. And I want to state it in the simplest way first, and then clarify a few little points of it. And then I'm going to send you out some larger version. God is the totality of all being and all existence that ever was, is, or ever will be, and more than that. Okay, so in other words, God isn't a big man in heaven, okay, separate from the world or whatever. God is ingredient in the totality of all that is, was, and ever will be, and can't be reduced to that, okay? So God isn't only that, but God is at least that. And when we get messages from God, we can get messages from God. We can get messages from the universe of which God is part. God is the consciousness of all of the universe, right? But when we get it, we only get the part of it that our a limited capacity can get, okay? And our limited capacity is that we have brains that and minds that have limits to them. Now, yes, the spiritual path has led many of us in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, many other traditions to expand our consciousness in various ways. But our expansion is, let's say, tiny compared to what we would need to really be able to get the whole of what God is sending us. And yet we can get some messages. Some messages come through. And a lot of human beings yearn for more and yearn to connect. And often in using their time, we actually do connect to a part of God's message. But we're limited beings, okay? We are limited. And now when I say that God is the total of everything that is, was, and will be, you might hear this in a reductionist way to say, wait, are you telling me that God is the material world? And here I want to say, not exactly. Also that, but not only that, because there is really actually nothing like matter. Matter is a conception that was developed by scientists in order to control and hence build safety for us as human beings. We could learn certain things by looking at the world through the framework of matter. And thank God for those scientists. They've made some real advances, important advances. Right on, scientists. Keep on doing what you're doing. It's terrific. But matter was an invention, okay? It's an invention that was useful, a useful hypothesis in trying to design, in trying to understand parts of reality. But there is no such thing as matter separate from spirit and consciousness. The entire universe is flowing with spirit and consciousness. And so we could be forgiven a little bit for not having a more sophisticated view of God, once you realize that God is the totality of all that is, was, and ever will be. But God is also in the process, like us, of evolving. God isn't some fixed object. To try and make it a fixed object is to make it into an idol. So God is evolving along with us. Now, I say it that way, and immediately you'll say, wait a second, that's telling us like God is dependent on our evolution. God is co-evolving with us and with all consciousness in the universe. Now, if we look at the universe, we will, as we tried to do last night when we were going up in our balloon and looking down at the universe and realizing at a certain point, wait, it's way more than we could possibly take in. We can respond to it with awe and wonder and radical amazement. We can say, yay to this universe, terrific, fantastic, amazing, wow. But we can't take it all in. But one thing we can reasonably suspect is that if there are 100 billion galaxies, which is what the latest estimation of the scientists are, if there are 100 billion galaxies, then there are amongst those each of those galaxies, many, many, many stars and many planets. And amongst those planets, it is probably an understatement to say that there are probably a few hundred planets that have developed conscious life, okay? Now, we got conscious life on this planet. Sometimes when we pray that it would develop a little bit more, and that there'd be a little bit more consciousness, but there is consciousness on this planet. There's so there are in hundreds of other planets in the hundreds of billion, the 100 billion galaxies, and I say it's probably if anybody heard this a few hundred years from now, they'd say, gee, what a small picture Rabbi Lerner has of the world. To only think that there were a few hundred planets with consciousness. There are probably millions of planets with consciousness, but let's just say a few hundred. Then if we say it that way, and we say, okay, then God's evolution is taking place in accord with and with parts of God's being that are the consciousness of all these other realities as well. So now if we say, well, we are part of God's consciousness, that seems to be greatly inflating us when we realize that we're a part of it. Like, for example, the consciousness of our liver is a part of the consciousness of our body and so most of the time we're not paying attention to that. But when something develops, a problem develops in some part down there in some part of our stomach or around that area, the abdomen or in the back, back down in that area, sometimes we get signals from there that indicate that we need some help there. So we try to send messages back. Sometimes meditation and so forth can work and help have an impact on parts of our body. Other times we're going to need surgery or interventions of various sorts. But what I'm saying is that the consciousness of the liver cell is a pretty limited consciousness, at least from our standpoint of what we can get of it. And so think of ourselves as the liver, think of our relationship, human beings' relationship to the God of the universe, like, not exactly, it's not an exact parallel, but like the consciousness of our consciousness of our liver cell. God takes it in, but we take in only a very tiny little bit of what the consciousness of that liver cell. So we are a part of the unity of all being. That's what we say. And our mantra is, I am part of the unity of all being, a manifestation of God's love on earth. We know that the central force that keeps this universe together is actually a force of love. The scientists gave it a name. They call it gravity. Okay, but where's gravity? Have you ever seen it? No, you see its effects in the world. Well, gravity is a material vision, a materialist vision of what keeps everything together. It's one dimension, but there are three dimensions. There's the dimension of material reality, there's a dimension of spiritual reality, and there's a dimension of consciousness. And so we want to understand any part of the universe. Eventually, we will develop a much more sophisticated understanding of how to look at the love that is permeating this universe, how to understand it. I've written about it in my book, Revolutionary Love. I hope you'll read it because I think you'll get a lot out of it. But I thought I was going to hit the high points of it in this talk. And then I decided, we're asking God for a little Rahmanas, a little bit of mercy for us. So I figured I ought to model that by a little bit of Rahmanas for you and not drag you through my more sophisticated presentation, which is only a tiny little bit of what a real sophisticated presentation would be of who is this God and what is she about and how do we get through to her. This holistic understanding of God is in the process of developing, and it will develop more and more and more over the course of the generations to come. Maybe in a few 100 years, people will look back and say, well, yeah, Beit Tikkun, they were onto something, but a tiny little bit of what they needed to be onto. But my answer then is partly that we can't think of God as the big man in heaven or woman or it or whatever in heaven that is withholding the interventions that she should have. So does this mean that God doesn't care about us? Well, yeah, in one level, it does mean that, not in the caring that we normally experience. But before we get upset about that, we have to re-understand the earth itself, because the earth itself is an embodiment of this three-part, a consciousness, a material reality, and a spiritual reality. And the way this earth was created, it was created as an embodiment of all three of these. And so, as Kat so brilliantly articulated it in the Vahayim Shemoah prayer, the world is created in such a way that it won't work. It won't work without the ethical dimension, the spiritual dimension, the consciousness dimension, working in tandem with the material dimension of the earth. And we haven't been doing that. Actually, we've been avoiding the ethical and spiritual and consciousness dimensions of this planet. And so this was an experiment that God did. God created this planet and maybe many other planets and in which the beings who are developing would have freedom, and the freedom to build a world based on the revelations that God gave us, which in part were in our 10 speech acts, in part perhaps in the version that I've tried to articulate and that I'm asking you to either adopt and use or rewrite in a way that you can believe in it. But this message to us was, yeah, you have to build an ethical world or it will collapse. And you might say, well, wait a second. If that's true, why did it collapse when the first messages were given to us? Like if the messages were given to us in Revelation to Moses 3,000 years ago, why hasn't it collapsed yet? Well, the truth of the matter is that this earth has been around for at least 3 billion years and maybe 4 billion years. And this and human consciousness has been around for at least 100,000 years. So this amount of time that's gone by is just like a moment in God's process. It's just a moment. God gave us this wisdom, gave us this insight that we were able to take from the universe. We were able to apprehend that message in the way that we were apprehending it. And we haven't been acting on it. We haven't been acting on it. And meanwhile, the earth has finally done what an earth that needs an ethical, spiritual consciousness dimension shaping its direction, what it said it would do, what we've discovered from our teachings, or maybe just from environmental science or wherever, we're getting it, that the world, the life support system of the planet, by the way, the planet's not going to stop existing, but the life support system, which is just a thin little layer on top of the planet, that's what we're destroying. So don't blame God for intervening. God created a planet that has this amazing interface of spiritual, ethical, consciousness, and material reality that all live together. And we have been screwing it up over and over and over again. Then we want to blame God? No, God decided not to intervene in this planet, to give human beings the opportunity to develop freely. And to be free means that God can't intervene every second and say, you've gone wrong here, you've gone wrong here, I'm going to straighten it out for you. Maybe God, the next, in whatever the next planet that are evolving consciousness, God will make it different. Maybe God won't give them free will. Maybe God will say, okay, there's this automatic part I'm giving you so that you never can make choices that are self-destructive and destructive to other human beings. Maybe there are times when I wish I was in that planet. Okay, but I'm not, I'm in this one. And so this one, we can't blame God. We have to look at the incredible beauty and magnificence of this planet and do what we can to save the life support system. And that's what Bill McKibben had to teach us, that it's up to us, that we have to do something. So we have solutions in the book, Revolutionary Love. I lay out a set of solutions and how to get there and what kind of movement we need in order to go there. But I'm not going to give that talk today, okay? I'm going to just say, read it. And I'm also going to say, be it, because we have to be Bill McKibben. We have to be AOC. We have to be all these people that are heroes, that we cheer on. No, don't cheer them on. Be them, embody them, become them, and bring in the spiritual wisdom of our tradition, and we will have a great possibility for transforming the world. So I just want to add one other little paragraph that I think I'm going to read to you, and that is that there's another dimension of God that our tradition insists on. God is the holder of the memories of all human beings who have ever been alive or whoever will be alive. While we cannot do that for every human being ourselves, we can do it for at least the humans we have known, whose physical presence on this planet is no longer with us.